name's Jeff Underhill. I was the president of APEGNB in 2018-2019. So I got out of school and I was working in Edmonton, Alberta, as a lot of engineers do. So I was there for about 3 years. And while I was there, I had a mentor who got me into SME, which is the Society of Manufacturing Engineers. So they had a local council in Edmonton. It's a lot different than APEGNB. Their council was more about just manufacturing technology, having member events, but it was completely self-funded. So we were part of a larger organization with a local branch, but we had to self-fund ourselves 100%. So we had to run events that made money, at least a couple of times a year. So when I moved back, I started talking to a coworker of mine, Lisa Frazee, who was involved with the St. John branch for many years. And there are many stories about her on that branch. She's fantastic. And I was telling her, I was new to the job, and we just were talking, and I told her about this SME group. And she said, you should be coming to our branch meeting. So she was hosting one that month. I had just started, brought me along, and there's probably 4 or 5 of us that are close friends. That was 10 years ago, and we still get together every month or two. So that's really who got me involved. I've brought some wacky ideas to that branch over the years. The SME group that I was with, when I moved, we were fundraising to buy a smart car so we could cut it in half and make it a display item at the university. Now, that ended up falling through after I was gone. But at the branch, with those kind of big projects in mind, we were talking about how do we spend our big surplus in the bank one time, and I said, easy, barbecue trailer for events. Like, who doesn't want a barbecue trailer? It'd be great, put APEGNB on it, and it was shot down roundly. But that was an ongoing joke with the St. John branch for a few years. When I was finishing high school, for me personally, it came down to a physics degree or an engineering degree. I knew I wanted to work with stuff. I like machines, mechanical, cars, all that. So I applied and got accepted for physics at Mount A and engineering at Dalhousie. Chose engineering, and unfortunately didn't work out at Dalhousie, ended up at UNB, but very happy with how it turned out. And if I ever doubted it, my wife has a physics degree and is now a high school teacher. And she has told me many times if she knew what engineering was at the time, she would have gone into engineering because there were no jobs for a physics graduate. That's a tough question. As a regulator, we're here to regulate the profession. Now, in my mind, through regulation, we're elevating the profession. We need to justify our existence as an association, as a self-regulated association, through enforcement, required professional development. So in my mind, that raises the profile. Now, it's not very flashy, but yeah, I think it's a really tough thing to talk about raising the profile of engineers. We're very humble. Not a lot of engineers like to brag about what they do. We're not in the news very much unless it's for bad reasons. We're not as aggressive as, say, the College of Physicians, who will put out a position on a government policy or something. Like, we're not really that type of association. So raising the profile it's been talked about a lot within the association, but I think it's very, very difficult to do it in a real tangible way. Probably the most obvious, in my mind, means that we do that would be through the salary survey every 3 years. So at least we can get that information out in the public. It's a survey through Atlantic Canada, so employers can see, where are the salaries for engineers based on experience, based on discipline, based on industry. And it supports our members as well. Like, when I took the job I'm in right now, that's where I got my salary from. The hiring manager and I looked at the salary survey and I said, I think I fit here. He said, I agree, sounds reasonable. The numbers are there. Well, our association is all about public safety. I think there's a lot to that. We have come down with disciplinary measures on people who claim to be engineers. Thankfully, we have not had a disaster, for that reason in New Brunswick. Other jurisdictions, Ontario, BC, they've had huge problems with members not doing their duties for public safety. So I do think regulating our profession is critical. Now, what that means in the future, I don't know. Self-regulation is, in some people's minds, going to be a thing of the past. I hope it's not. I think there's reason to believe it won't be. But it is under attack. So as an association, we need to keep working on keeping ourselves legitimate and maintain our existence. Well, I prefer this way myself. We're regulated by engineers. So we have a council of professional engineers and committees full of engineers. It's kind of like a peer review. Professors always like to have their papers peer reviewed, so it's legitimate. So engineers regulating engineers, I think, is a great thing. We probably take it for granted a lot of the time because we've been doing it for 100 years. But no, I think it's absolutely the way to do it versus, I know there are plenty of great engineers that work in government, but I think that would be a completely different situation. Well, there was a few things. The night that I was made president at the last year's AGM, some of these St. John branch people that I've gotten to know very well over the last 10 years, we had an unofficial coronation in the hospitality suite, which most people would not have been privy to, except I ended up publishing a picture from it in our magazine. So that was definitely a highlight. We had a great time with that. I believe I was wearing a Burger King crown at one point, and a cape and a scepter. So yes, very unofficial. So, from time on council, you get to know new people every year. There's always some turnover. That's been one of the real highlights. And you get to make a lot of contacts. But just this last year, as president, and we had an inordinate amount of people from St. John on council, way more than usual. We have at-large positions now, both from St. John. So when we would travel to meetings, we make a better effort to carpool. So we decided to have a meeting in Miramichi, which my family originates in Miramichi. Both my parents are from there, so I thought, great. Council hasn't been there in many years, so it'd be great to help that branch. Go up to Miramichi, do a nice event at the Rod, invite people from government. We had the Department of Transportation, the minister came and had dinner with us. Fantastic. So we decided to carpool from St. John because it's a long drive. So, of course, as president, and I'm driving these three ladies, I thought I'd be polite. I'd rent the car, which what that meant was I had to get up in the morning from Hampton, drive to St. John, get the rental car, drive back by Hampton with these three girls in my car. For some reason, I didn't get them from St. John to just come pick me up. But anyways, we got going to Miramichi, and from years of going to Miramichi myself to visit relatives and stuff, I would go up Route 126, the Rogersville Road. I didn't think twice about it. Unfortunately, there was a couple of girls in the car who preferred Route 11. They thought of the Rogersville Road as a backwoods dirt road through the middle of nowhere, highly dangerous. So we got driving, and that was the laugh the whole way up, and it just happened to be heavy garbage period. So there was mounds of garbage at the end of everyone's driveway. They were convinced that we were going to break down and be left in a pile of garbage at the end of someone's, etc. So it was just a hoot driving up, and we had a fantastic night at a meeting and an event. It turned out great. But they never let me live that down. They drive on Route 126. I just thought it was normal. But apparently that's a really rough end of the country. But yeah, so working with Andy for the last year. So it was brought up at the annual meeting by me that, we have Andrew McLeod retiring after 17 years. I'm his last president. So depending who you ask, either I drove him out or he wanted to end on a high note, not knowing what's coming down the line. So I like to think the latter. No, Andy was fantastic. He mentioned at our annual meeting that him and I probably talk daily, and I wouldn't be surprised if you averaged it out that it was probably 3 or 4 times a day that we would talk on the phone. So yeah, we got along great. So easy to travel with the exception of going to restaurants. That's probably come up before in these interviews. Andy does not eat vegetables. Steak and fries, he could eat 3 meals a day. But that's just one of his quirks. And, once you understood that that's just how he is, it was just funny for all of us. He ran our business, fantastic. Financially, we're in excellent shape. We're absolutely going to miss him. You always look forward to the future. Who knows what new ideas are going to come through the door. But yeah, 17 years, that's a long stretch, especially for our association. So we're indebted to him. We've told him that. It'll probably take him some time to appreciate that that's true. But yeah, no, he was great. It's hard to look into the future. But I know right now, like here in 2019, British Columbia is going through a big fight. Their government is imposing regulations, new act on their association. It's going to be a completely different world in BC for their self-regulated engineers. That could happen here. In BC, it wasn't for any particular reason. It was just like all it takes is someone to have an idea in government. They hold the cards. We're here by an act of government. So if the government of the day decides they want to change how engineers are regulated, we can lobby them for how we want it to be done. But ultimately, the legislature is going to decide. So yeah, just seeing what's going on in BC right now, in the future, maybe the dominoes fall across the country. Other provinces might see their system as the best. Us in New Brunswick, Engineers Canada has put out an opinion on it that, we believe what we're doing now is the most effective way. So I think there's always going to be risk. And, here in New Brunswick, we've always kept kind of our finger on the pulse of what's going on across the country. It's nice that we have a national organization to speak on our behalf. And they also can keep you in tune because they have their hands in every province and territory in Canada. So we can at least stay up to date and be prepared. So there's the chance that maybe our technologists will want a new act in the future and want a defined scope of practice. That's come up in the past, and our members were not in favor. In the end, there's a chance it might not be up to us. So that could be another issue that comes up that could be a risk for us. But I'm an optimist. I like to think that things are good as they are, and that there's no reason why they won't. It's going to change over time. But ultimately, I think the system that we have is good. So I'm hopeful it'll stay around. Well, I'm one, like, I'm the youngest grandchild on my dad's side. He has a large family, and he's the youngest child of his generation. So I often find myself, you get to that age that you're getting nostalgic about your family history and all that. I feel the same thing about engineering. Like, I thought it was great that we had some of our oldest living presidents come and video for this, because their experiences I find so interesting when they're talking about engineering from the 60s. So, we're talking 50 or so years ago. Well, actually, I think Bill Barrett said it was 55 years ago. So I find that incredibly interesting to talk to those guys about what's happened in the past. So I hope in 50 years that there's still that, appreciation for the work that was done in the past, and, that eagerness to learn, and not that you want to dwell on what happened in the past, but just to more of, be aware of it. Don't repeat the same mistakes we made, sort of thing. So I hope, they say the 2050 council, I probably won't be on it, but I hope that, there will be some people in their 80s and 90s coming to our annual meeting, and I hope they get the chance to go talk to those people and say, look, what were the big issues back in 2018 when you were on council, just, out of their own interest. Absolutely. And often you don't feel that until the end, which is too bad. Andrew McLeod mentioned that. He said, I gave this speech at the annual meeting, and I said, look at that, you got a standing ovation. He said, first time in 17 years. And often you're not appreciated until after you leave. But for me, being able to speak at the annual meeting as president, I had my parents in the front row sitting with the CEO, and you could see it in their faces, like, and I'm old-fashioned. I love that approval from your own parents. But they told me outright, we are so proud to see you up there on stage as president. And they're not engineers. This is a new group to them. But they enjoyed that. That really meant the most to me. So just to hear them say that